Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening as a podcast, remember to subscribe and hit the bell to track upcoming releases.
There we go. Recording.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, Nora, I remember when we spoke to each other, we were in a convent surrounded by groups of people eating with their families and a bunch of trees, and you were just off to somewhere that I was thinking of my mind as sort of like a forest by a river to do a warm data lab. And I really appreciated meeting you then, and I hoped we would talk again. And it's an interesting thing to find ourselves in this moment now, given some of the developments of the world. And I'm glad to be here with the opportunity to ask a few questions and to share with the world, with people, a little bit of as something we can presence to help steady and realize perhaps a way to be grounded, a way to make effective choices, and to find a way to come into a way of being in integrity with each other. So that's my sort of hope. That's why I'm wanting to talk to you. And how 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 would you characterize your world at the moment?
Ah, I just want to say, first of all, Tim, that the thing that I'm most appreciating about the question you just asked is what a struggle it was
Yeah.
to articulate. And I think that actually is important because we've had interviews, conversations before, and I know that that's not your normal pattern of communication. And I'm actually really serious about this because one of the most important things that we can do right now is to put in check some of those more rehearsed scripts, and certainly the trajectories of where we all were 3.5 weeks ago. And so what I heard most of all in your question is that the trajectory is moving. And I think that is a sign that you're paying attention. What I'm most worried about right now are the people whose trajectories are not changing, who are trying to figure out how to position themselves in this moment, how to platform this crisis into the right post or podcast, how to catch the next meme, or uh, even jump on the latest news story. And I think for me, one of the things that is in view is just how important it is to be in a heightened state of attention to the fact that there's so much changing, and that the game of 3 weeks ago is not the game of now. So the generating of status, the all of that stuff is in a different frame. And it's actually, I think, it's not easy for everyone to do that. It's just not. I remember plans change, and when plans change, there's a lot of confusion around that, and everybody's plans just changed completely. Seniors in high school that are getting ready to graduate can't graduate, and people who had weddings planned, and people who are, then there's the people who are just trying to feed their kids and get through the day. People, I think domestic abuse is on a serious spike right now. People who have difficult home lives and are stuck in the house. So there's the bigger questions too of what's swirling out there. How is this going to land? And we're not close to seeing that yet. So, I think the only thing that can really be done right now is just to pay attention, and to pay attention with as much kindness and care for yourself and others as you can. And there are big strategic pieces that have to get put in place. There's stuff that the governments are showing up for. Maybe yours is doing a little better, but I mean, for the most part, it seems like the general political framework is at least 10 days to 2 weeks late on their shutdowns. So as what I said to you at the beginning of this, before you turned the record button on, I'll say again, which is that in our family, we're already dealing with people who are in serious condition. So it's not just a time to be home and read and be with the kids. This is not just a vacation, or there's another wave coming. And people in Italy will tell you about it. It's where you have to say goodbye to people who are dying alone that you love. And, we're not built to be alone. We don't know. How do you do quarantine with a split family? How do you do, what happens when today my husband's 72-year-old father is coming in from Mozambique, where he's been? And what do? How do we have to take him in? He's in danger. He's coming through airports. What do we do? How do you hold this? How do you quarantine someone who's your family in your house? And not only do most of us not have the technical knowledge of how to do that, the other piece of it, of how to have those conversations, how do you have those conversations across families of, well, it's probably better you don't come. We love you. Stay away. But this person can come and you can't come. And, there's hurtful things happening right now. And so I guess there's this beautiful need for community and for contact. And in the midst of this, there's this other layer too of just what's going on, and how do we show up in a way that is not reckless. That's all I want to be, is not reckless.
Yeah. The experience I'm having right now is, I think, it's a microcosm of the challenge I'm facing most days, and I think a challenge upon all of us. And I mean, right now, it just so happens that in the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes of my life, the challenge to be together is very difficult. And I find myself here committed to be with this process. And it's not, and the point you make is deeply involved in that. There was something you said to me about when we spoke 4 or 5 months ago about what does it mean to share voice. And I am deeply interested in this question, but not from an intellectual perspective. I'm deeply interested in the being with expression itself. And that involves presencing what is. And when what is threatening overwhelm, this is when integrity is most challenged, and groundedness is challenged by definition. And so that's how I'm feeling. And perhaps, what does it look like to express in a way and to act in a way that isn't reckless?
I mean, I think for one thing, it's about asking the question again and again. Another thing is understanding that there are patterns and ways of perceiving that are so ingrained that they're very difficult to change, and they're going to change unevenly. So what you're able to perceive and what your neighbor is able to perceive may be very, very different. So you may be perceiving the importance of watching out for quarantining, but other people may not actually be able to perceive yet how important that is. And it's frustrating to have these kind of trajectories of, yeah, but when are we going to go back to business as usual? Right now, if you're even remotely attuned to systemic process, this is economic, this is health, this is education, this is a big punctuation. No matter what happens, there will be life before Corona and life after. And right now, guess where we are? We're in neither of those categories. We're just in it. And so the how of being in it is so critical, because it is every move we make is a field of ability, opened and closed. And so the way that we show up, the way that you think about what you need at the store, the way you think about what your own personal relationship to your family is. How are you connecting with people who you care about but you've had arguments or rifts with? What's happening with the elders in your life? How are you communicating to the world? So it's really in all of that, from how to get food to your neighbors when they're sick or when they can't go out, to I need to hold on for 1 second.
Yep. No
My
problem.
doorbell is ringing.
No problem.
Just 1 second.
Problem. Go ahead, please.
I'll be right back, okay? Oh my gosh.
It's more than okay. Is everything all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just okay, you know what it was?
What?
My chicken coop's arriving.
Oh, cool.
I know. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes,
Are you sure you don't need to tend to it?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
I just need to catch.
Nora, this is life, hey. This podcast has not been about positioning, although I have very much felt the pull of the or like the I very much felt the effects of the inadequacy of my positioning at sometimes. But like uh, I'm just here, to be honest with you, and I'm here because if I wasn't, I'd be lying to myself. And it's hard enough to live in this world and in this life, even doing one's best not to live a lie. And I will not live one.
Hmm. And I think we don't even know, so what's essential? That's the question. And I think we're just finding out. And in our lifetimes, we've never really had to ask that in that way. The way that we sorted out what was essential had to do with a completely different set of systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, maybe everything will just go back to normal, but I don't think so. I think we're in this for a while, and I think it's going to really shift our world. And so that's what my sense is. And certainly looking at how harsh the virus actually is, uh, our systems are not even remotely ready for this. So it's going to be a time of total transformation. And people have been throwing that word around for the last couple of years, I think irresponsibly. Transformation was something beautiful, and it was something to, we had weekend transformational workshops. Like, remember that crap?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Never been to one.
me neither, but I certainly got
They were
invited.
around.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
just people using that word, and it's that thing of looking at what transformation is it's not really a weekend thing.
No.
And yeah. So this, I guess that's what I'm really appreciating how important it is to get into the most humble and of our human states. And I just want for the record to take note that the two of us are sitting here in a state of quite a bit of privilege, and we're feeling the shake. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a wealthy person. I don't think you're a terribly wealthy person, but still, there's a lot of privilege in this conversation. To be
Yeah,
able
I
to
have access to a credit
participate,
card.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and to take the time to be thinking about this, and to be, you know, having this moment of exploration.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other people who are just in a moment of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an incredible luxury to sit right now at the sidelines, and we're not completely at the sidelines, but we're not in the there's a lot of people who don't even have a home to quarantine in. Let's just remember that.
It's such a challenging thing to maintain the humility of that, because, well, for many reasons. But hey, look, I'm really feeling that the pull here to share my own experience in a way that I'm not, in a way that I'm comfortable with you as an individual. I don't know how comfortable I am publicly in my current state, as I really have to say I'm just um, nothing less than me being here with what I can be is appropriate in this context. And I'm just man, I just am not in a high functioning place unless I go right through the heart here. And it's because right now I don't feel privileged. And it's not that I am not it's not that I don't have a sense of the suffering of others. It's that as I'm confronted with the immediacy of my being, I am myself suffering. And that is a dynamic that we all face when we tune in to the state of play and our involvement in it. I think most of us, if we look deep enough, because the depths of what the depths of the pain of life have been, I've wanted at many points in my life to escape from that, and I care a lot about the reality of that and realize that this is a potentiality of experience for all human beings. And the dynamic of integrating oneself wholly with that potentiality and embodying that integration in a grounded place in the world, coming back to the center, is the pattern of doing that seems to me to involve, it's kind of like this. I feel, and I'm not saying this because in the following metaphor, I'm not saying I know to be true, and I'm expressing this because I care a lot about what you have to say, and I really couldn't have a higher opinion of you, Nora, from the time we spent together. It seems to me we can drown in a puddle or we can drown in an ocean, and from the perspective of the person who drowns, they are more or less the same. And therefore, the dynamic of how we deal with our respective puddles becomes of paramount importance. And it can be so challenging to be capable of taking the suffering of the world in and remaining grounded enough to still be in an effective place of decision making. And I felt the urge to say this, because otherwise I'd be leaving something out.
Yeah, I think there's always a context, and that context matters. And it's like you said, I think that the thing here is about decision making in the moment. and what kind of wherewithal, what sort of perception, what sort of you said groundedness is in place there, because there's all these decisions, and they're so contradictory right now. Everything is at my mother used to say, at sixes and sevens. Everything is in direct contradiction. We have to be together, but we can't be together. We have to be apart. We have to support each other, but we can't touch each other. We can't be near each other. We have to, and on the one hand, that's a philosophical dilemma, but when it's your mother or someone who you love that's in the hospital, that contradiction, like you said, a puddle or an ocean, it doesn't matter if you're at the door of the hospital or on the other side of the world. You can't go in to be with that person. You cannot be near them. And so do we, what is continuing right now? I think that's a really big question. What does it mean to continue? What are we continuing? And what are we not continuing? And how do those things start to interlace as these larger pieces are moving? And there's things that are getting ratcheted up into full tilt war strategy language, complete with military assistance and so on, and keeping a clear head and heart in that is not easy for anyone. But also we're triggering back into a world that made sense, that it's so bizarre. I think we all have to ask ourselves several times a day, is this, unless you're really in the throes, like the medical people in the medical profession, there's a lot of, is this really happening going on? You see those photographs of people partying at the beach, and just vectors. It's a vector party. And so it's the, is this really happening thing? And then what does that mean that it's happening? How, what, where are the lines? I don't know. But there's this thing of what's essential. And it has been possible to justify that what was essential to some people was not essential to others in the system that has been in play. Yes. And right now, the cost of that is coming up large and visible to those who didn't want or couldn't see it before. But the cost of exploitation was more than everything. And so the wealth that was gained on it, it doesn't have worth anymore. And I think we're going to continue to see that. We don't know what's going to happen with the banks or the stock markets or the, supply chains or the. And I mean, I just want to say that the food that we get at the supermarket is actually produced by people. The tops of these industries are filled with gazillionaires, and the bottoms are basically, the picking and the tending and the actual work with our food is done by people who can barely feed their own children. There was a cost. This is not what producing life should have been. We, the process has gotten wildly off course, and in ways that have been extremely destructive. across all of our systems, economic, education, health, I mean, in every direction. And the biggest one is actually identity, because that's where all of these come together. And so, when I see those kids at the beach, or when my, people that are close to me say things like, oh, you're really overreacting, it's just a flu. Everything's going to go back to normal. In a couple weeks, we're going to be out of quarantine and we're going to go back to normal. And there's too many relationships that are built on other relationships that are built on other interdependencies and other interdependencies that are coming unraveled right now for that to happen.
Mm.
So it's one thing if there's a bump in a system and the economic system takes a hit and the stock market crashes and people lose a lot of money. And, remember in 2008, we had a near crash. That's one thing. It's one thing if the education system is suddenly, up in arms about something. But it's another thing altogether when all these systems at once start to come unraveled. Because there's second and third order contingencies and interdependencies that were holding not just the economic or the education or the health system in place. They were holding entire cultural ideas of what the future is, or what success is, or what wealth is, or what health is, or what family is, or these things that were running much, much deeper than the actual structures and policies and things that could be measured and detailed and defined. And so there's the changes that are taking place across and through multiple contexts now. And that's why it's difficult to find words for them. We don't even really have words for that liminal space. But when we talk about what's continuing and what's not continuing, the things that aren't continuing are so deeply entrenched that it's hard to even, for a lot of people right now, it's very difficult to see where they are. So, I mean, can you imagine right now, for example, a world in which it makes sense to buy a first class plane ticket to a luxury resort with your Prada shoes and your Rolex watch? Like, all of that is one big heap of non-essential. And the lines and tentacles in which those things were wrapped so that they did make sense last month, all those lines and tentacles have gotten at the very least reframed for some people. I don't know for everyone yet, but I think it's moving quickly, and I don't think that the appetites will be the same at the end of this.
Yeah. One of the essential functions or businesses that are allowed to remain open in Australia as of today, one of the few is alcohol shops, bottle shops. I'm not sure, Nora. I'm not sure at all. And I know you're not sure either. I
I'm
know
not
that.
sure either, but
I
I
know
want to
that.
say something about the alcohol shops and the cigarettes and the coping.
Mm-hmm.
People are coping.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are coping by, trying to get attention in social media and being, still trying to be who they were. And other people are coping by having a drink. And other people are coping by eating sugar or whatever. People are coping with big change right now. And so I'm not saying, that it's a good idea to be destructive, or that it's essential to be destructive. But I do think that we need to be very careful with where we draw the judgment around how people are trying to figure out how to be in a world that's changing this fast.
Yeah.
And that comes down to the people partying at the beach too, frankly. At
Yeah.
some level, it's just, they're just not getting it. And there's a lot of stuff out there about, this is about people who can do exponential math and people who can't. But even that is a wild oversimplification. It's how do you hold this? My mother is 91 and she's in a elderly living apartment complex in Washington State in the States. I'm in Sweden. There's no possible way that I can get to her. Even if I were to, take a boat or find a way to get to the US and get in, they would not let me in to see her. So I just have to say that there's a pretty good chance that I could never see my mom again. That's like right there for me. And when I talk to her and she says, yeah, but we only have 9 more days of quarantine. And I say, Mom, I think it's going to be longer than that. And please don't go outside in 9 days. But for her, I talked to her the other day and she was putting on her eyebrows and her mascara while we were talking. And I said, Mom, where are you going? She said, the living room. She's just completely stuck in her little 1-room apartment and maintaining. Like, I have to live with myself. I got to put my eyebrows on, or I only have one place to go. It's the living room. But I'm going to look like me. I'm going to keep my dignity together while I do that. So, whatever it takes. But at the same time, this is coming in hard. And I think the thing I'm really worried about is just how to deal with the aloneness and dealing with huge change and massive trauma in aloneness. And this is so not where we are built for. I mean, we're creatures that rely on contact, physical, emotional, communicational, familial, cultural. I mean, every single thing in our world is made of togetherness.
Yeah.
So that's the piece I'm really concerned about, is that's the essential. That's the essential.
Yeah.
And without that, there's going to be a lot of other weird essentials.
Yeah.
What kind of replacements are we going to put in there so that we can talk on Zoom, or we can so if somebody needs to smoke some cigarettes or have a drink, I don't think I have much judgment around it right now. I think we just got to get through this.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfectly fair point, more than fair. So there's these double binds or tensions that we are always dealing with. And we have here then this relationship between judgment and non-judgment. And we have also the notions of openings and closures, which to me is essentially something like choices which have consequences. And then what is the process of making choices that open the way, perhaps more than they close it, unless the close precludes possibilities that we actually might want to keep open. What is worth continuing? we have these notions of continuity of relationship. John Beveke put something nice. He said the other day, continuity of contact as a characterization of faith. But in some other words, for me, it is how to be with transformation, how to there's something magical that happens in that moment of expression, which is never a moment. There's something magical that is where I am here and now, there with you. And I am here to tune in, and I can come out with expression. And there is expression which is more conducive to my, and let's say, I love one of your terms, by the way, the meaning of it, the mutual learning environment.
Mm.
There's a way of my being here which is more conducive to our mutual learning than not.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it would, we don't need to revisit the alcohol point, but what was in my mind as I mentioned that is the I would go so far really as to say that the sort of abject failure in our society to have an understanding of what is essential to enable continuity of what's worth caring about.
And it's like we have to build that from scratch because we have never been in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people were seeking the solace or the healing for the wounds in their lives from shopping trips and, you know, weekend workshops on transformation. And you know, things have gotten very weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so out of this weird concoction, there's suddenly a need to be able to clear all that nonsense and those weird lines of I've been signed out. Huh. Are you here still? Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
here.
I just got a note that said I was signed out. But we have to clear all this nonsense of the past, of things we're, you know, totally entwined in. And suddenly remember something that is something that the compost pile knows better than I do, which is actually how to make relationships that build life. And I honestly have never lived in a world where that was the essential thing to do. I've never been to that world. I mean, I've been to the forest, and so I've seen it there. I try my best with my family and the work that I do, as you know, but also I, you know, I, like you, I mean, here we are, we're several generations into ways in which our physiological processes are digesting proteins or manifesting desires, or have intimate longings for things that are and ways of being that are located in a system of systems that was non-vitalizing. And now we have to suddenly wake up and know what's essential. And we don't know. We're like, essential? Yeah, okay, essential. I definitely need face cream.
Yeah.
Right? I gotta get a bottle of bourbon. Like, these are essential things. And I mean, I'm laughing. It's not funny, but I'm laughing because of the, I guess, surrealism of it all. The absurdity is just vast. But I think I like that sort of framing there, that the compost knows more about how to be in a world of vitalizing relationships than I do,
mm,
because I
mm,
have been encultured into a lot of processes that have blinded me,
mm,
um, and that
mm,
have been served by exploitation that was beyond where I could see
mm,
conveniently.
mm,
And so I have this idea of essentialness that is connected to brokenness.
mm, mm. Hmm. So the wisdom of what you say is 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 so evident to me, and I'm also feeling the urge to play here what I consider the um, another side of the dance,
Mm.
and with with many people who I respect and delve deeply into the more mystical kind of metaphors of making sense of the nature of our experience and the interconnectedness of the world. This often occurs, and I often find myself being on, well, it can be different sides of it, but often often a side of, well, I'll leave that for now and just say what came up to me to presence, because it's, I think, a sobering thing for you to say what you just said, that that compost knows more about how to be in touch with vitalizing relationships, and yet there's also a sense here that I'm experiencing right now, like the very act of, and we can use this as an example, the very act of being here, I can reflect on the transition here of my own state. And
Mm.
as uncomfortable I am in even reflecting on the sort of the coming into this conversation in a cycle of agency that was diminished, and I had to really presence the vulnerability of my emotion in order for the connection between us to be coherent, for you to get a sense of who I am and where I'm at and inform this. That process is part of the process of a vitalizing relationship.
Yes, it is. And that's the thing. We are the compost. We just don't know
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the piece. And that's exactly what I'm saying. It's
Mm-hmm.
there. It's so deeply there. I mean, it's what we're made of. That's why we
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to do anything alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same piece. It's like we've been in all these relational processes all along. We just identified them very weirdly.
Mm-hmm.
And now those weirdnesses are melting.
Mm.
And that's what is the discovery point, I think. The zone here is that it may be possible for there to be discovery. And
Yes. Well.
yeah, but we'll see.
Yes. Okay. Well.
I totally agree with you. It's there. We got
Yes.
this.
Yes. We do. We do.
It's in us. Did it not? What are we? Some hundreds of trillions of organisms. We are that. We are vitality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We just
We
got
are.
really confused.
Mm. Well, that there is a beautiful place to end this. So, Nora, thank you so much for taking more than more time than could have been. But I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Tim. And I I just want to end by saying that there's a lot of doing here that needs to be done. There's a lot of doing. And it also needs to hold the time of reflection and rethinking, to be careful that the doing doesn't become an extension of the way of being that's in change, that's getting reorganized. So I think that's the main thing, is there's a lot of urgency And it's going to take, if every urgency that we go into thinking about whatever, how can we stave this emergency in a way that also builds vitality, right?
Okay.
That's the piece for me.
Okay. Well, I think that requires some further discussion, and perhaps we can do that with John in a couple days' time. So I will be there for that one. I promise
Good.
you. So
I look forward to that.
I will send a invite for that, so we both have the same thing in our calendar. And okay, all right, Nora. Thank you. I'll stop
Thank
the
you.
recording here.